Taiki has had a crush for years on a senior who turns out to be the daughter of his mother's best friend, and now they're going to live together. Just starting high school, Taiki is thrilled about cohabiting with his crush. Every day, Taiki runs to school early just to see her, but as soon as he enters the gym, a basketball hits him. The senior, Chinatsu, rushes over and gently touches the bruise on his forehead, apologizing with a pack of snacks. Taiki is so smitten he'd give his heart to her if he could. Their school, a combined junior and senior high specializing in sports, is where Taiki practices badminton, always striving to be the first on the court. However, Chinatsu from the girls' basketball team always beats him there. Taiki admires the hardworking and charming Chinatsu and dreams of marrying her someday. His friend Kyo teases him, pointing out that Chinatsu is set to be the new face of the basketball team, admired not only for her skills, but also her charisma and star quality. At the school, every sports club has its territory. Taiki's badminton skills are just average, and he's the newest on the team. He only gets to speak to Chinatsu during morning practice, but remains optimistic. His mom used to be on the school's basketball team, and he believes that without trying, there's no chance of winning. Kyo, feeling sorry for him, advises him to at least make an effort to get Chinatsu to remember his name or get her contact info. When Taiki's friend Hina comes over, they start joking around. Seeing Taiki troubled, Hina eagerly offers advice when he asks what can make a girl happy. Her immediate response: appear confident and reliable, and most importantly, have a fit body. Taiki regrets asking Hina, realizing her advice is a bit too unique. Suddenly he saw the senior ahead of him, softened by the sunset light. She just lightly flipped her hair and captured Taiki's heart. He mustered the courage to speak to her, but was unsure what to say. As she was engrossed in a book, Taiki wanted to ask what she was reading, but hesitated to interrupt her. Suddenly, Chinatsu sneezed. Taiki immediately took off his scarf. In a rush, he handed it to her and dug out a thermos from his bag, along with gloves and a hand warmer. The next second, he regretted acting so hastily. Chinatsu didn't mind at all and kept staring at Taiki, curious to see what else he would pull out. Taiki continued searching, making Chinatsu laugh. Then, it was Taiki's turn to sneeze. Chinatsu personally wrapped him in the scarf. In that moment, Taiki even thought of names for their future kids. Before leaving, she reminded him not to catch a cold and accurately called out his name. Taiki was surprised. Why did Chinatsu know his name? Then Chinatsu mentioned, "Your mom is really thoughtful." Taiki then noticed his mom had written his name on the scarf. Their first conversation was awkward, but Taiki didn't mind. He was happy she remembered his name, determined to keep trying. But after training, he saw Chinatsu talking to the basketball coach, interrupted by Hina. Hina noticed Taiki's feelings, telling him not to dream too high, mentioning she saw Chinatsu with a boy earlier, but then said she was just teasing. Taiki was indeed uneasy. That night, he realized he left his stuff at the gym. Going back, he found Chinatsu still training alone. She called out Taiki's name again. Unsatisfied with her performance during practice, she wanted to train a bit longer. Seeing Taiki watching her, she passed him the ball, inviting him to play one-on-one. Unfortunately, Taiki lacked the skills and soon collapsed from exhaustion. Still, Chinatsu complimented his agility. Taiki mentioned his mom used to play basketball and would occasionally practice with her. Chinatsu's mom was also in the basketball club. Taiki's eyes lit up. It's fate, he thought. Unfortunately, he had no interest in basketball himself. He never passed the ball when he played before. He realized he wasn't suited for team sports. Badminton was different. Standing alone on the court, all responsibility lay on him. The outcome, good or bad, was his alone. Taiki enjoyed this tension. Chinatsu commented, "So you are a masochist. No wonder he liked to practice so much." But Taiki knew he was no match for his senior. After Chinatsu retired from the middle school club, she resumed training the very next day. That was when he fell in love with her at first sight. Back then, Taiki was still in middle school. Living near the school, he came to pick up something and saw Chinatsu crying alone while practicing. Later, he learned they were just one step away from the national competition. She must have worked so hard, which explained her frustration. Taiki admired such a senior, so he wanted to work hard like her. Hearing this, Chinatsu's face turned red. Even she had forgotten about it. Then, the teacher called them to leave quickly. They packed up together, accidentally holding a basketball together. Their fingertips touched. Taiki felt her hands were warmer than before. The next morning, Taiki packed his lunch for school practice. Seeing a magazine on the table, he flipped to the page about his senior. Unexpectedly, his mom knew Chinatsu because Chinatsu's mom was her old teammate. "It's really fate," Taiki thought excitedly. Then, he heard his mom say Chinatsu's parents were being transferred abroad for work, and they would move in mid-March. Taiki realized the conversation he saw Chinatsu having with the coach might have been about quitting the team. He rushed to school, feeling indignant for her. She came earliest every day, trained the hardest and most desperately, and understood frustration better than anyone. Should she just give up? Out of breath, he arrived at the gym. Chinatsu was there, spacing out. Seeing Taiki's confused face, he blurted out, "Senior Chinatsu, please make it to the national competition." He said the senior taught him that one should strive daily if they have a goal and to keep moving forward even if they lose. So he urged not to give up because her parents were going overseas for work. Before he could finish, Chinatsu interrupted him, "I'm not going abroad. Although my parents are working overseas, I've arranged to stay with an acquaintance for a while." This made Taiki feel embarrassed again. Chinatsu quickly explained that Taiki's words the previous night had reminded her of her time in the middle school club and her initial desire to compete in the national competition, as well as what motivated her to persevere. So, the senior sincerely thanked Taiki and invited him for a rematch, suggesting badminton as well. It was the weekend, and Taiki had not yet recovered from his embarrassment to the extent that he dared not meet Senior Chinatsu. But as he went downstairs, he saw her in his family's dining room, causing him great shock. Then both of their mothers came in and informed Taiki that Chinatsu would be living with them starting today. It turned out the acquaintance she mentioned staying with was Taiki's family. Taiki's family welcomed Chinatsu warmly. Taiki was especially smitten. Every move she made tugged at his heartstrings. He thought about enduring this for 2 more years until she graduated, feeling it was as daunting as going directly to the Olympics as a novice. After her bath, Chinatsu called Taiki to bathe. He was too shy to even look at her, but she approached him, offering to read manga together. Taiki quickly lent her the manga. Chinatsu was very open and admitted that although their mothers were close, she had only met them a few times, so suddenly living in their house was nerve-wracking. However, having Taiki, someone familiar, made her feel much more at ease. After saying goodnight to her little junior, she left Taiki feeling guilty. He was overthinking things while she was so straightforward. He couldn't help but imagine her in the bathtub, which was unbearable. Taiki turned his frustration into motivation during training, only to be cautioned by Kyo to make sure no one found out that he and Senior Chinatsu were living together. After all, the senior is the crush of thousands at their school. If they found out, Taiki's life might be in danger. Of course, Taiki is also very lucky to live with the person he likes. Maybe they could really end up together. But Taiki didn't plan to take advantage of the situation because he knew the senior stayed in Japan solely to play basketball. Facing a senior who dedicated so much to basketball, how could he say something like asking her to be with him? Therefore, Taiki set a goal for himself to make it to the national competition this year. If he couldn't achieve that, it would prove he wasn't worthy of her. Although the goal was high, Taiki was optimistic. Kyo had already gone to rest, but he was still looking for someone to continue training with. At night, he would do basic physical exercises at home and constantly push himself. During breaks, he watched training videos others had recorded for him to analyze. Unexpectedly, Chinatsu caught him and insisted on watching them. Chinatsu thought Taiki was already very impressive for being able to chase the ball quickly on the court, but Taiki said he wasn't fast enough. If he couldn't improve his first step, he wouldn't be able to control the landing spot of the ball better. A player shouldn't just chase the ball, they should handle it more effortlessly. What level was this for the national competition? As soon as he said it, Taiki regretted it. He had wanted to achieve some results before telling the senior. However, she didn't despise him for his foolish aspirations. Instead, she ran back to her room and brought him a bracelet she had made herself when she decided to stay in Japan, using it to represent her resolve. Taiki didn't hesitate and took it, then tied it around his ankle. Seeing him tie it so tightly, Chinatsu took the bracelet and helped him tie it herself, cheering him on and showing him the same bracelet she wore around her ankle. Just like that, they had matching couple bracelets as soon as they started living together. Taiki hadn't snapped out of his happiness yet, thinking only of working harder and harder until he wore out the bracelet. But with her doing this, wouldn't it make him like her even more? So, to rid himself of these distractions, Taiki decided that for every stray thought, he would add 30 sit-ups. He didn't rest even during the spring break and was packed and ready to go early in the morning. Chinatsu stood at the door to see Taiki off, making him feel like a newlywed. This caused him to start doing sit-ups frantically as soon as he got to the gym. Hina noticed something was off and asked him if there was something going on with a senior from the basketball team. Taiki couldn't dare tell Hina, who was known to gossip, that he and Chinatsu were living together. He then bumped into the senior, who told him he had left his wallet at home. Taiki loudly and deliberately thanked the senior for finding the wallet, making her think he didn't want others to know they were living together. She replied and left immediately. Taiki, sensing her mood was off, quickly consulted Kyo, the only one who knew. Kyo, a great assist, helped Taiki analyze Chinatsu's feelings, causing him to panic. When the teacher assigned them to move chairs together, Taiki volunteered to help her, but the senior pretended not to know him. Instead, Hina openly started a conversation with her, asking if she had a boyfriend. Chinatsu didn't, and when asked if she wanted one, she said no, as she was too busy with club activities. Taiki wasn't surprised by her response. After moving the chairs, the coach, who had heard the badminton coach praising Taiki, mentioned his improved striking power and physical fitness, hinting he might qualify for the national preliminaries. Taiki wanted to share this joy with the senior, but only saw her walking away. Chinatsu was too concerned about the misunderstanding that she didn't want others to know they were living together. During training, she fell, and Taiki, feeling he wasn't in a position to approach her as they weren't close, followed her silently to the locker room. He took the opportunity, when no one was around, to care for her and apologize, explaining his true feelings. On one hand, he was hesitant to speak about living together with the senior. On the other, she was too popular, and he feared gossip could affect their club activities. That's why Taiki pretended not to know her. Chinatsu didn't expect this to be the reason. She thought Taiki liked that girl from the gymnastics club, especially since he started acting distant around her only after Hina appeared. Moreover, Hina had asked her if she had a boyfriend, which felt like she was probing. Chinatsu thought Taiki didn't want his crush to know they were living together. To avoid arousing Hina's suspicions, she deliberately kept her distance from Taiki and even considered moving out to a low-rent apartment. Taiki didn't realize the senior had thought so much about it, which he found adorable. He couldn't help but laugh heartily and called the senior silly, a scene Hina just happened to witness. The preliminaries were approaching. The badminton club would start its internal selection next week. Taiki's set goals seemed far-fetched. First, to qualify within the team, then to make it to the top 16 in the regional preliminaries, and only the top 2 from there would qualify for the nationals. At least he needed to win against Kengo, the third best in the county, to have a chance. Upon hearing this, Taiki thought, if he could beat Kengo, nationals were within reach. However, it seemed a bit crowded at the club today, mainly because most people were there to see Chinatsu, while the rest were there for Hina. Hina's coach was particularly fond of her, even calling her a girl blessed by the god of rhythmic gymnastics. Their goal was directly to be Japan's #1, especially since Hina had already secured 4th place nationally in middle school, and her father was on the Japanese national gymnastics team. Listening to their conversation, Taiki accidentally stared at Hina and was jokingly asked to pay 2,000 yen as an admission fee. Unfortunately, Taiki treated Hina like a brother, only feeling smitten when he turned to see Chinatsu. After school, Hina caught up with him again. Because Hina was going to a store near Taiki's house today, Taiki suddenly felt uneasy. If Hina saw Chinatsu entering his house, it would be problematic. Chinatsu was still at school practicing, so he wanted to quickly take Hina to the store. However, Hina easily got distracted by various things, like stopping in her tracks at the sight of taiyaki. Taiki tearfully paid for it, but then Hina refused to eat it because it exceeded her calorie limit. She needed to maintain her weight strictly. Even a few hundred grams could affect her performance. To avoid more trouble, Hina chose to endure. Taiki thought Chinatsu was amazing for resisting the taiyaki. It was already a challenge, yet Hina didn't consider it an effort, as she always held herself to strict standards, treating it as the norm. Taiki admired this disciplined side of Hina, and his words made her heart flutter. Still, she thought Taiki was even more impressive, especially since he was brave enough to pursue Chinatsu. As his close friend, she naturally hoped he would succeed. While they were chatting, they both saw Chinatsu and Kengo laughing and walking together. Taiki was heartbroken to see his crush, the senior goddess, laughing and walking down the street with a handsome senior. Hina quickly comforted him, insisting they were just good friends, pointing out that she and Taiki also walked home together. Taiki deceived himself with this thought, but the next day, he saw the senior couple chatting again. They were classmates, desk mates, and both class representatives. Taiki's heart broke again. Even though the senior had said she would focus on club activities and not date, how could one stop liking someone? Kengo, the star of their badminton club, was undoubtedly excellent, but the coach also had high hopes for Taiki. While resting, Taiki picked up balls for the senior, his mind full of yesterday's images. Chinatsu asked him when the club activities would end because she had forgotten her keys. They were whispering when Kengo suddenly interrupted, calling Chinatsu Chi. Taiki was devastated, especially since she seemed so used to it. Was it because they were desk mates, or was it a bond between the top athletes of the sports clubs? Taiki walked home dejected, whispering the senior's name at his doorstep, only for Chinatsu to open the door the next second, disgusted with himself. Chinatsu hadn't expected her junior to get home before her. When she left school, the badminton club had just entered the activity room. She asked Taiki if he had run back to avoid getting home first and had waited outside because she anticipated this situation and had even waited a bit in the activity room. Taiki's irritation vanished instantly, realizing the senior had noticed his every move, revitalizing him. He thought of running another lap just to calm his emotions and reevaluate his relationship with the senior. Suddenly, Chinatsu moving into his house made him think they were close, but realistically, he was not at her level. He shouldn't obsess over who she talked to and should focus on the internal selections, moving towards his dreams to one day stand beside her as an equal. Taiki is among the top newcomers, but facing the main players is a different story, especially Kengo, who has never lost a match. However, Taiki has decided not to let whatever relationship Chinatsu and Kengo have affect him. The very next moment, he sees Chinatsu cheering for Kengo at the badminton team's internal selection and feels a sour twist in his heart. He tells himself he doesn't care, but overhears another senior asking Kengo about his recent closeness with Chinatsu. Kengo says there's nothing between them but admires her dedication. At this point, Taiki is almost shattered, especially when his next opponent is Kengo, and he loses 5-1. Kyo and Hina are distressed watching this. By halftime, the score is 11-4, yet Taiki doesn't seem discouraged, focusing only on the points he missed. Kyo is surprised, wondering if Taiki isn't bothered by his earlier concerns. Taiki admits Chinatsu inspires him to work harder, but doesn't want to use her as an excuse for losing. He plays badminton because he loves the sport, not for Chinatsu. As the second half begins, Taiki, retying his shoelaces, sees his anklet and feels more determined. He remains calm, steadily returning every shot, but the gap from the first half is too large, and he loses the match. Although Taiki is likely to qualify for the preliminaries with his current record, he can't feel happy. Even though he played well in the second half, Kengo controlled the match's pace, leaving Taiki unwilling to accept defeat, unaware that Kengo feels the same. On the way home from school, Taiki reflected on his own shortcomings compared to the seniors. He realized he needed to work harder and gain more experience. Unexpectedly, Chinatsu caught up with him and suggested they go to a special place. She led Taiki to a park where, to his surprise, she pulled out a pair of badminton rackets. She guessed he would want to practice more after their match. Despite not being good at badminton, Chinatsu joined him. As they played and talked, she mentioned that losing the match didn't mean Taiki was weak, especially since he scored more in the second half than Kengo. Still, Taiki felt unsatisfied, attributing the first half's poor performance to a skill gap, which made Chinatsu laugh. Chinatsu had been paying attention to Taiki, aware of the issues the coach pointed out during training, which Taiki diligently practiced during morning sessions. Even after recognizing his skill gap with Kengo, he didn't give up but instead played better in the second half. Taiki was comforted by her words, understanding them better coming from someone he liked. While they were playing, Chinatsu received a message from Taiki's mother asking when she would return home. Taiki noticed a charm with the name Chi on Chinatsu's bag. She explained it was a gift from a classmate, as her classmates called her Chi. This reassured Taiki that the nickname was not exclusive to Kengo. Chinatsu initially wanted to go home with Taiki, but he felt it was inappropriate for them to be seen living together, as it could reflect poorly on her. He suggested she go ahead while he stayed back to practice a little longer. The badminton team's roster was finally announced. Surprisingly, Taiki and senior Kengo were paired for doubles. Kyo thought it awkward to team up with a rival for the national competition. Taiki, on the other hand, was focused on beating Kengo, wondering how he could win in doubles. Before he could finish his thought, Kengo called him for training. During the session, Kengo overheard Taiki mention that he didn't like Chinatsu, which led Kengo to directly ask if Taiki had feelings for her. Despite the pressure, they both got serious about training. However, Taiki couldn't match Kengo's stamina, and Kengo teased him using Chinatsu as motivation, suggesting her future boyfriend would need to be formidable. This spurred Taiki into training intensely for a week, leaving him exhausted. Kengo's rigorous fitness regime was daunting, but Taiki made noticeable improvements. Kyo thought Kengo was genuinely helping Taiki, while Hina speculated that Kengo was showing off to intimidate Taiki. However, Taiki didn't suspect any ulterior motives as their training was equally tough. Kengo's speed and control remained superior. If only Taiki could reach his physical condition, playing would be more enjoyable. His friends teased him about being a masochist for enduring such hard training. Besides physical training, Kengo also gave Taiki valuable advice. Leaving school exhausted, Taiki ran into Kengo and Chinatsu. Kengo introduced Taiki to everyone as his doubles partner, humorously critiquing his skills but affirming that Taiki could become stronger. Now everyone, including the seniors, joked about Taiki's resilience. Chinatsu quietly complimented Taiki on his toughness. Suddenly, Kengo checked his phone, mentioning his girlfriend was looking for him. Shocked, Taiki exclaimed, "What? You have a girlfriend?" It turned out Kengo's girlfriend was from the entertainment industry, and they had just started dating after she confessed to him. Following a time when he almost gave up, Kengo had been teasing Taiki all along, with Chinatsu's help in picking out cosmetics playing a role in his new relationship. Taiki realized that Kengo had just been joking with him. Chinatsu has been living at Taiki's house for a month now. Every morning, Taiki sees the dazzling sight of his goddess. He doesn't even feel like staying in bed anymore. However, because he's been so distracted, he picked up the wrong sports uniform one morning. After lunch, Kyo started asking about Taiki's cohabitation with his senior. Just then, Taiki received a message from his senior. Realizing he had taken Chinatsu's sports uniform, they needed to find a secluded place to exchange it. On the way, they ran into senior Kengo. Feeling guilty, Taiki turned around and declined his training invitation, hurrying off to the multimedia classroom. Unexpectedly, Hina and her friends were there, as the gymnastics team was meeting there today. Just then, another girl bumped into Taiki, knocking the clothes out of his arms, revealing Chinatsu's name on them. Taiki panicked, splashing dirty water on himself to prevent Hina from picking up the clothes, claiming they hadn't been washed since the summer of 9th grade. Hina immediately stepped back, remembering Taiki always wore that uniform for training. Could it really have been unwashed all this time? Taiki had no choice but to own up. Time was running out before Chinatsu's gym class, and the place was crowded. Luckily, his senior messaged him to meet on the rooftop. Seeing Chinatsu in her school uniform, Taiki was momentarily stunned. Chinatsu, unconcerned, started changing right in front of him, mentioning that the girls in their sports department were all trained and unguarded. Taiki couldn't resist, so he turned his back, but even just hearing the sounds, his imagination ran wild. As images flashed through his mind, when Chinatsu emerged dressed, Taiki had to crouch to hide his body's reaction, letting his senior leave first. Though it was a wonderful experience, upon reflection, it threw cold water on Taiki. Chinatsu daring to change in front of him might mean she doesn't see him as a man, so Taiki decided to toughen up his masculinity. After training, Hina called him, knowing his preliminaries were starting tomorrow, and cheered him on. Senior Kengo was about to say something, but Taiki quickly denied it. Kengo told him not to worry, as they would surely win the doubles. For next week's singles, making the top 16 was enough. Taiki was irked, believing he could make the top 4. Kindly, Kengo reminded him, "You forgot your bag." That evening, as his mother was busily packing for Taiki, he claimed he had already packed everything. Then, the next moment, he accidentally spilled water on the sports uniform. Taiki felt he was too nervous, even though it was his first high school competition. He had attended big events before. Such nerves could lead to basic mistakes tomorrow. The more he thought, the more agitated he became, so he went to the yard to practice his swings. Chinatsu heard the noise and came out to see that Taiki had his clothes on backwards. He changed right in front of her, making her blush. She hadn't realized her junior had such a good physique, clearly showing the effects of his recent muscle training. Yet, Taiki was still not satisfied with himself, knowing muscles didn't mean better badminton skills. Sensing his tension, Chinatsu approached him and poked him on the head at a pressure point to relax him. Whether it was the acupressure or her soothing words, Taiki felt calmer. Then Chinatsu added, "You still have next year and the year after." But Taiki's first thought was that she would have graduated by then. The next day, Taiki and senior Kengo confidently went to the competition venue. Their doubles match went too smoothly, with Taiki feeling Kengo had to keep saving the game. It seemed he still had much to practice. Then, another player who had just won his match saw Kengo and kicked at him, which Kengo easily dodged. They had been partners in the youth team. The player, with a mohawk, accused Kengo of breaking a promise to share Chinatsu's contact details. He had fallen for Chinatsu at last year's school festival and had been pestering Kengo to introduce them since. Kengo had never followed through. The mohawk player then jokingly asked Taiki if that was too much. Taiki just thought Kengo did well. In an attempt to get Chinatsu's contact, the mohawk player vowed to win today's doubles match, but his teammate was soon taken away by an ambulance due to stomach pain. Kengo and Taiki won without a fight, but the mohawk player declared he would settle it in next week's singles with Kengo. Unfortunately for him, Kengo didn't need to play the preliminaries, so he pushed Taiki to face his former partner. If he beat Taiki, he would reveal Chinatsu's contact details. Taiki was shocked. The mohawk player sized him up, confident of winning. Taiki was tempted to punch his senior, thinking, "You really are bad." Thus, Taiki was determined to defeat the mohawk player to protect Chinatsu's contact information. Back home, Taiki overheard a conversation between Chinatsu and his mother. Remembering the awkward moment when they parted last night, he felt unsure how to face her. To his surprise, Chinatsu felt the same. Both his mother and Chinatsu wondered why Taiki was pushing so hard when there were still 2 years left. Last night, when Chinatsu mentioned this, the mood turned cold. Reflecting on it, Chinatsu realized her words might imply that losing this year was okay, which wasn't her intention. She thought about how quickly a year passes, and with only 1 year left for herself, she envied Taiki. Her words were more about her own fears than encouraging Taiki. Thus, she kept reflecting, while her mother simply thought she was a good kid. At that moment, Taiki appeared and declared to his mother and Chinatsu that he must win the singles match too, because he couldn't let Chinatsu feel uneasy. The day of the singles match finally arrived, and Taiki faced the Mohawk player. Kyo had heard from Taiki about Kengo's bet involving Chinatsu's contact details and thought it was unfair. Kengo clarified that he would not disclose the contact details if Chinatsu herself was unwilling. He believed Taiki would win. If Taiki lost, however, he would face a special training plan devised by Kengo, which made Taiki shiver. The first game began, and the Mohawk player's smashes were powerful, seemingly overpowering Taiki. The nearby practicing women's basketball team came to watch, noticing that the situation seemed unfavorable for Taiki. Only Kengo believed it was part of Taiki's strategy, knowing him to be a slow starter who initially focuses on returning the ball to exhaust his opponent, making the opponent run more. Kyo felt reassured and went to prepare for his own activities. Passing by Chinatsu, he asked why she wasn't watching from a closer spot. Just then, Taiki narrowly returned another smash, causing Chinatsu's hands to tremble with nervousness. Kyo then informed her that the match stakes were her contact details. According to Kengo's bet, even if Taiki won, he wouldn't gain any advantage. Therefore, Kyo asked on Taiki's behalf, if Taiki won, Chinatsu should accompany him to the aquarium. Kyo also mentioned that Taiki had been performing well lately, catching balls he previously couldn't, likely motivated by having someone with similar goals around him. Thinking of her energetic and hardworking junior, Chinatsu didn't want Taiki's efforts to go unrewarded. Just then, Taiki scored another point, and Chinatsu's heart raced with excitement. She agreed that if Taiki won, she would go to the aquarium with him. If Taiki won the match, he could go on a date to the aquarium with his senior. Unaware of this, Taiki still gave his all and caught the opponent's ball. The player with the Mohawk was just a step too short and missed the ball, resulting in Taiki's victory. The Mohawk player was not pleased and challenged Taiki to a practice match at their school, reminding him to check the women's basketball team's practice schedule. Taiki was so annoyed he almost cursed on the spot. After all the matches, Taiki achieved second place. A sophomore from his school got first, but it was fine since they had already qualified for the county preliminaries. Hina came to comfort him, saying that reaching second place as a freshman was impressive. Then Taiki's phone rang. He was shocked to see a message from his senior inviting him to the aquarium the next day. Excited beyond words, Taiki puzzled Hina, who wondered when they had become so close. Kyo explained that he had seen Chinatsu, the senior, at the match, and asked her to reward Taiki for his win. Hina got excited too, celebrating Taiki's first date with his crush. She seemed more thrilled than Taiki, almost as if she was forcing it. She quickly left when someone called her, with her team noticing her unhappy demeanor since she showed no joy for Taiki. That night, Taiki was too excited to go home, and even did push-ups at the door to calm down, which his mother noticed. Once inside, Chinatsu had already returned to her room, and Taiki stayed up late, unable to sleep, looking at a marine life atlas and imagining Chinatsu in a dress. Just thinking about her in a dress made him feel overwhelmed. Hearing noise from her room, he realized she was also awake. Unable to contain his excitement, Taiki overslept the next morning, waking up at 9:30 in a rush and barely considering what to wear. He hurriedly put on a shirt and rushed to the station, dropping his wallet and scrambling to pick up the coins. After seeing him, the senior came over and patted him on the back. She was actually wearing a dress. Taiki almost thanked her aloud, completely captivated. Then, they both went to the aquarium. Chinatsu seemed very excited, a side of her Taiki had never seen before. Watching her play with the fish instantly charmed him. Yet, he was internally conflicted about what the senior might think of their outing together. Most likely, the senior just wanted to go out and agreed to Kyo's request. However, she might also be upset that Taiki used her as a bet. Therefore, Taiki decided to cover all her expenses today. Just as he made this decision, Chinatsu suddenly took a photo of him, claiming it was for keepsake. Taiki was embarrassed and anxious, but couldn't insist she delete the photo. They spent the whole day at the aquarium. Chinatsu even hugged a giant mascot, making Taiki almost green with envy. They also watched the penguins. While Chinatsu was watching the penguins, Taiki couldn't help but keep looking at her. Suddenly, a little boy accidentally bumped into Chinatsu, causing their hands to touch. Taiki's heart raced, hoping they could visit again as a couple next time. Yet, considering a confession might make the senior uncomfortable if she found out, he decided to keep his feelings to himself for now. As the date was about to end, Taiki was about to leave when Chinatsu grabbed him, saying she had something to tell him. A secret hope rose in Taiki's heart. Could the senior possibly feel the same? However, Chinatsu started by apologizing. She was still troubled about something she had told Taiki before, saying he still had 2 years left. She felt she couldn't continue living with Taiki's family without properly apologizing. On one hand, Taiki thought Chinatsu was being too serious. On the other, he felt ashamed of his own thoughts today. It turned out she had asked him out only to comfort and apologize. He didn't mind such a trifle, having not dwelled on it at all, even shocked that the senior had been troubled by it all week. However, since the senior was staying at someone else's house, she was inevitably cautious. So, Taiki sent her a penguin emoji to use whenever she felt uncomfortable at home or wanted to talk to him. This way, Taiki would listen to her concerns. Unexpectedly, right after he explained this, Chinatsu sent one just to tell Taiki that he was a great roommate. Back at school, Taiki was re-energized and immensely grateful to his friends, beyond what words could express. Then Kyo brought up an important question. What if the senior also liked him? Just the thought excited Taiki tremendously. He happened to make eye contact with the senior, and Chinatsu, smiling, pointed at her mouth to indicate he had food on his face. Taiki's face showed a hint of delight. He would definitely be happy to date her. Suddenly, Hina came over and interrupted his daydream, annoyed at his sneaky smile. Kyo, watching Hina thoughtfully, then reminded Taiki that there was no time to revel in fantasies, especially with the county preliminaries approaching. The competition was fierce, particularly from another high school that was leading the pack and had won last year's national championship. Upon hearing this, Hina cheered Taiki on, confident in her own upcoming gymnastics competition. While they were talking, the artistic gymnastics advisor approached with reporters to interview Hina, who now sported a proud expression. Although Hina was a star in the competitions, to Taiki and Kyo, she was just an ordinary girl. Would that intimidating high school be viewed the same way? Athletes often need orthopedic services. Hina unexpectedly ran into Chinatsu at the orthopedic clinic. Noticing the charms on Chinatsu's bag, Hina felt conflicted but thought she should support her friend. She asked Chinatsu if she knew about the time Taiki sprained his ankle in 8th grade, then started telling the story herself. During a school camping trip, Hina slipped while hiking and Taiki saved her, but he twisted his own ankle, making him unable to practice sports for a week. Hina felt guilty, but Taiki said he should blame his poor reaction and even found a new challenge to work on. With a sigh, Hina remarked that he really was a foolishly passionate badminton player, but helping others was indeed a virtue. After sharing this, Hina felt proud, thinking she had spoken well of Taiki, unaware that Chinatsu had seen through her intentions. Chinatsu realized that this junior might have a crush on Taiki, hesitated to speak, but ultimately remained silent. When they left, it started raining, and Chinatsu lent Hina an umbrella, but accidentally left her phone in the clinic. Hina offered to return it and followed Chinatsu, only to see her entering Taiki's house where he came out to greet her. Their conversation sounded as if they had been living together for a long time. At that moment, Hina was taken aback.